Will you run down the attendees list for us, Lindsay, as well, briefly,
Yes.
once we get started, yeah?
Of course, yeah.
We're now live.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this urgent Leader Council Cabinet Member meeting, Tuesday the 18th of August at 1 p.m. Lindsay, would you mind just running through the attendees list for us so that people know who's here and their roles?
Yes, I'm the DSO for the meeting. My name's Lindsay Stevens. My colleagues from DSO, from the Democratic Services are Alex Huff, Karen Squires and Dom Monaghan. They'll be dealing with the technical side. Councillor Chris Poulter is here. He's the leader of the council. Councillor Martin Repton, he's the Exec Scrutiny Chair. Councillor Paul Pegg, he's the Community Scrutiny Chair. And Councillor Roy Webb, who's the Cabinet Member for Adults, Health and Housing. The officers present are Matt Palmer, who's the Head of Housing Options and Homelessness, and Phil Taylor, who's the Housing Strategy Development Officer. And that's everybody.
Thank you, Lindsay. We'll go through the formalities first, then, and item 1 is apologies. Any apologies?
I've not received any apologies.
Okay. Item 2 is the identification of urgent items to which calling will not apply, and I guess item 5 fits that criteria.
Yeah.
Item 3 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest in relation to the papers heard today? I'll take silence as a no then. And item 4 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of April 2020. I've read them and content with them. Has anybody got any matters arising from those minutes? No, I take that to be a none. That leads us then to urgent contract and financial procedure matter, item 5. Can I just, before I ask the officers to present the paper, just be clear about the circumstances as to why it needs to be dealt with as an urgent leader meeting? Perhaps Roy or Matt, did you want to address that for us, and for in particular Councillor Repton's benefit?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Councillor. The Next Steps Accommodation Programme bid was launched about 3.5 weeks ago, a very tight timescale in total to submit a bid as part of the initiative to provide accommodation, as following on from the everyone in, and in pulling this bid together, we've been required to seek the views of our partners through the Homeless Liaison Forum, the views of Housing Strategy, the views and support from the Cabinet Member for Housing, and then to pull this bid together it's been an incredibly tight time frame in order to do that, which has fallen outside, unfortunately, of the parameters to take this to Cabinet. The bid has got to be submitted on Thursday the 20th of August, with the next Cabinet meeting scheduled for the 9th of September. So unfortunately it's fallen outside of that parameter to be able to take it to Cabinet, which is why we seek an urgent leader approval, please.
Okay, well, with that explanation, I'm content that it's the appropriate way for it to be dealt with. Any other representations, thoughts on that? Councillor Repton, you content?
Well, just a question. Are there any risks in the urgency that we've had to operate within? Because sometimes, you know, with a 3.5 week deadline, and again, I understand the reasons for that. It's placed on you by government. You have no choice. You either put the bid in or not, and you want to try and get it right. But what are the risks in terms of having to do this so quickly?
The risks. I think I'll go down. We've highlighted the what the risks are, haven't we?
I guess, Martin, there is urgency in putting the bid together, but what we're doing is it gives us authority to put the bids in or to do it, and then it does allow us, the process allows us more time to make sure we get it right. So the outcomes should be safe. The urgency is in the time pressure upon the officers to be able to get enough information to justify the bid. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I understand that. I think I just wanted to get it, out on the public domain that yes, there are some risks, but the thing is getting the bid in. Then you can build in the safeguards, and presumably we'll have an opportunity to go through to try to make sure this is right and works for everybody.
Yeah, I think that one of the risks to make everybody aware would be certainly on the capital component of the bid to go and purchase 20 properties within this financial year, is that actually there is a possibility that we don't achieve that we might achieve 15 or 19, and in those circumstances, having sought the views and clarification from Ministry of Housing, Communities, Local Government, they have said that any shortfall in what we managed to achieve on the capital acquisitions would then likely to be recouped on a pro rata basis. So essentially, we're looking for £60,000 from the Ministry of Housing for a capital capital sum to purchase these 20, each of the 20 properties, and therefore if we only manage to acquire 19 properties, we would likely be asked to return £60,000 back to the Ministry of Housing, but that will be covered in, should we be successful, that would be covered in a memorandum of understanding that we would agree to.
Can I ask a question? How, again, not being critical of anybody in the city, but how do we try and make sure that with the clock ticking, we purchase the right homes in the right locations to make sure this works properly?
Yeah, I mean there's no doubt purchasing the right homes in the right locations, that will be a challenge, but we rely upon the expertise of our colleagues in housing strategy who are working doing that on a daily basis, not necessarily purchasing a property every single day, but that is what their day job is. They're aware of what the requirements are. And initially, when we looked at properties that are on the open market, one-bedroom properties on the open market in Derby, they start from around £50,000 or £60,000. But we're budgeting on around about £120,000 per property to ensure that the fees involved in acquiring a property are met, and also that any renovations were to bring the properties up to a standard, a decent and safe home standard that Derby Homes provide, that we're able to achieve that.
Okay, Martin, I'm hopeful that once we put out the message that we're looking for properties, we won't be short of properties to consider. Shall we get into the guts of the report? These sort of issues we can deal with. You'll have opportunity, Martin, and others to ask questions as you go along, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So, Martin, we have some recommendations, and can you address what you need to in relation to this report for us? Thank you.
Matt,
yes.
Sorry, yeah. So the Next Steps Accommodation Programme is the follow-on from the Everyone In initiative, where Luke Hall called on all local authorities to bring all rough sleepers in off the streets as the pandemic took a grip across the country. Over the course of 90 days, 3 months, we brought in 211 individuals as part of this Everyone In, 190 of which were placed in the commercial hotel that we took over on Pride Park, namely the Holiday Inn Express. Derby, we managed to move everybody out of the hotel and made an offer of accommodation to every single person that was in the hotel. And I think it's fair to say that we are, were and still are ahead of the vast majority of local authorities. I understand that somewhere in the region of 65–70% of local authorities are still operating a hotel model. So the Next Steps accommodation programme, which this funding is about, there's two components to it. There's one which is 161 million, mainly comprising of capital. 131 of that is capital, 30 is revenue funding, and then an additional 105 million for revenue funding, and that primarily is for local authorities that are operating a hotel model, but also to encourage those to take the lead and the learning of local authorities like ourselves that have moved people on out of the hotel accommodation into that Next Steps accommodation, which we come to and discuss within this report as part of our funding application. The funding application total is for just under £1.9 million, with £420,000 of that for revenue funding for the next 3 years to support the 20 people that we plan to accommodate in the 20 units of one-bedroom self-contained accommodation that we want to purchase. 1.2 million is the figure, as I alluded to earlier, for the contribution from MHCLG to purchase 20 one-bedroom properties. That's 50%, with the other 50% being funded through the Housing Revenue Account capital programme, making a total of 2.4 million. There's £35,000 of revenue funding attached to that to represent the last quarter of the current financial year, January, February and March of 2021, to support those individuals in that properties with £140,000 per year thereafter for 3 years of funding for that, which is where the £420,000 funding comes from. We also, as I say earlier, that where we are and that on the top of the curve, that we've moved everybody out of the hotel. We've started to make an offer of a Housing First pilot, which is essentially what it says on the tin. Is providing the housing first and then wrapping all the support around the individual. And this is aimed at some of the most complex individuals. I believe Housing First started in America, but there's been some huge success in Finland, where they've been operating that for over 30 years and all but eradicated rough sleeping in Finland. And it's a concept that has been run and replicated in other areas of the country, London, Manchester, Liverpool being highlighted, and areas where we've taken some learning from as to how we would want to operate our model. So there's some money within the bid for Housing First. Supporting Housing First, we've also submitted an element within the bid for 4 units of supported interim accommodation, which would be using temporary accommodation, but again with that wraparound support for some really chaotic but vulnerable rough sleepers that we want to get off the streets. We have £40,000 for some safe space and COVID secure sleeping pods. So we've got a facility within the city called Safe Space. It's operated by Derby City Mission, and that essentially was a big open area, and it was quite a large area, but because of the nature of COVID-19, it wasn't deemed suitable for anyone to sleep and stay overnight. So we had to rejig that and operate an alternative venue for the safe space overnight, which we've done. We relocated that to Milestone House on a temporary basis, but we plan to get some COVID secure sleeping pods where they will be essentially big glass rooms that individuals will be able to sleep in safely without the risk of the virus spreading, because it's an airborne virus, because it would then be contained within the proximity of these COVID secure pods. So that is another component. We've got an element within the bid for 6 units of enhanced support accommodation. Again, it is another option, an alternative for some chaotic and vulnerable individuals with lots of support being put in. Perhaps it's not as intensive as what the Housing First is, and it's not a totally self-contained unit. It would be a room in a house. We've also put in a bit within the bid to secure 3 private rented sector, 3-bedroom private rented properties for some of the people that are the classed as non-qualifying people from the European Economic Area. So no recourse to public funds, although they don't have recourse to public funds, but they're non-qualifying. So under the legislation, we're allowed to provide accommodation for those people for up to 12 weeks, and our aim is to use that accommodation to take those people off the streets, keep those people off the streets, and get them to a situation where they become eligible and into employment. Ultimately, that is the intention, to work intensively with those individuals and get them eligible to be able to sustain a life in the UK, which is where they want to be. A lot of them, when we talk to them, don't want to return to their homeland and would rather sleep rough in the UK than sleep rough in parts of Europe. So it's an accommodation option for those people, which we've often struggled with. There's a component within the bid to procure some bed and breakfast for customers that wouldn't necessarily be deemed as a priority, where we would have a statutory duty to provide accommodation or interim accommodation for. So by having bed and breakfast that is paid for, there's a direct route that the street outreach team can engage with people on the streets and say, actually, I can get you into some accommodation. We've got a room in a bed and breakfast, and take them off the streets there and then. So that will be a real rapid response and an alternative to some of the hostel provision. Principally, that is what our bid comprises of. The total amount, as I said, is just under 1.9 million. and if you want me to go through the costs of each of the items, I can do so. There's a table that we've included within the report.
Matt, thank you very much for that. A couple of things to say on this. Firstly, from our point, just to repeat our thanks for your teams and works on this. I know the Minister holds us as an exemplar, as do the Ministry, in the way we're trying to tackle these things. And for that, I thank you and hope that long may that continue, because we can show people how to best do it. We don't have the advantage that Finland do of rather colder weather than we actually have to get people in off the street, so we have to be quite creative about how we do it. And it seems to me that the bid is comprehensive. It tackles and addresses a lot of the tactics that we're using to address the issues, and should massively help to support those efforts. Can I just ask, from my point of view, one particular question? We're talking 20 properties. I understand that they're not necessarily going to be in a block or anything like that. They could be, the spread of them could be anything across the city. Have we any idea of the spread or the areas in which we'll be targeting? The first question.
Not specifically. I think the honest answer is that the market will have some role to play in that, in terms of what is available on the market to purchase. I would suggest that we would be better not having concentrations in blocks, but having them dispersed over an area of the city. So that is what we will be looking to do.
Okay. My other question was around how we intend to manage the tenancies, because with the best one in the world, I think we know from experience that these people who are homeless don't always stay with the premises and see out the terms of their leases and things like that. How does the proposal intend to deal with such things?
So within the proposal, I think there's a couple of bits. The accommodation it will be provided on a non-secure basis, but that can be renewed, and ultimately we want to keep those individuals housed and accommodated for forever and a day. We don't want them returning to the streets once we've got them off the street. So the £35,000 for the last quarter of this year, and the ongoing support costs of £140,000 for the next 3 years, that will provide the resource to employ support to keep those individuals in that accommodation, which will also be complemented by the work of the street outreach team, who also support people within their own tenancies. You're on mute, Leader.
Sorry, thank you. 50p in the box. They will receive the necessary wraparound support to try and assist them to keep up with the tenancy and stuff like that. But so are these properties seen as like an interim accommodation with a view to housing them in the general housing population, so that we have a capacity to accommodate people who become homeless and need to be dealt with in that way?
Yes, so the properties, it will be fluid, but equally, I think we have the ability to leave somebody in that property and take another property to utilise on that same basis. So I think there's flexibility within the model that we're intending and proposing to take forward with this.
What level of similar accommodation do we have now? Is this doubling our offer, or what sort of level is it at? What difference will this make?
I think this will make a huge difference. I mean, and it's quite an exciting time, because we've never had anything like this where we've said to somebody that has been on the streets that we'll provide you with a house. And certainly, you know, when I've been out, and Phil Taylor will agree, I'm absolutely sure that you will talk to some individuals on the street and they'll say, I'm not interested in X or Y or Z, I only want my own property. And this is an option and a solution in those scenarios, that and the support that we can wrap around will be absolutely huge. So one of the other things that we're setting up is a multi-agency rough sleeper hub, which is a virtual hub, and that will coordinate all services. So from that safeguarding, which I think has been something we've improved upon, and improved upon vastly over the last 12 to 18 months, working with the MASH team in adult social care. So they'll be an integral part of that, as will treatment services. We've finally just, not us personally, but with the trust, have just recruited a community psychiatric nurse specifically dedicated for homeless services, which we lost just over 12 months ago, and has been a real gap. So they will be part of that. The police work they work very close with us. I think they have other demands and challenges, which sometimes means that they don't respond as quickly as we always want them to, but we all know what those pressures are like. The probation service are joined in and linked in with that. So I think there's a real multi-agency arena that it's probably always been there, but has absolutely been strengthened as a result of the pandemic, as we've come at, we've all been working remotely, and there's been some strengthening of some good partnerships anyway, and a real commitment.
So good. One of the potential positives that coming out of this situation that we need to harness. My final question is just in relation to funding, because this is a match funding capital scenario, £1.2 million proposed to come from our HRA reserves. Just confirmation that is a sustainable position, doesn't leave the HRA reserves too low or anything?
No, it doesn't lead on. Apologise for spending the HRA money, but that HRA money is available, and there's plenty of money in those reserves to achieve this objective.
Okay, thank you. So then, shall we see if there's any questions from elsewhere? Roy, did you want to add anything?
I've got a couple of questions, Chair, if that's all right.
Okay, I'll come back to you in a second, Baggy. Just see what Roy needs to add.
I just want to say how supportive I am of this bid. The work that we did with getting everybody into the hotel accommodation, and the lessons learnt from that have added value to this bid. I think that the team have worked incredibly hard in trying to put this bid together. As Matt said, it's not a simple bid. It's a complicated situation. It deserves a proper solution, and this takes us a long way towards achieving that proper solution with all the partners on board. And Matt didn't mention the Department of Work and Pensions, who are working with us on this, plus all our other partners across the city have really added value to the work we are doing with homelessness. And one of the big things we learned around the support in the hotel was that having that wraparound support really did add value to the offer that those people that we took in off the streets have really benefited from. And although we've had one or two that refused accommodation, the vast majority of those in the hotel were given accommodation, accepted that accommodation, and with that continued wraparound support are achieving consistency in their tenancies. There is one issue that Matt did mention, and it is subject to approval, is that we make these non-secure tenancies. So non-secure interim tenancies, and you'll see that in 4.4. Now that is something we've not done in Derby before, but because of this situation and this bid, that is the offer that we are making, so that if people do enter into tenancies and walk away, and as Matt said, that is a risk, although it's only slight, but if they do walk away, then it means that tenancy can then be ended and it can be offered to somebody else to assist in getting people off the streets. It's not going to be a council policy. It is purely for this project and for the accommodation that we're offering. So I'm wholeheartedly supportive of this and hope that you are able, Leader, to accept the recommendations.
Thank you, Roy. In that regard, I mean, I understand anybody's concern about them being unsecured tenancies, but as Matt said, the intention here is to house homeless people ad infinitum for as long as we can possibly keep it that way. Whether it's in these individual properties is one thing, but what we need to ensure is that we get best value out of these properties and we have them available and occupied absolutely as much of the time as possible, and doing it this way helps us secure that, and I'm content with that in that regard. So, Councillor Shanker-Baggy, do you have any? You had a couple of questions.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Baggy.
Okay, yeah, a few questions. I mean, supportive of the bid, it's really important, and I think what we've seen in recent months when we focus on homelessness, it just proves what can be done when the rules and the resources are there to deal with it. Just on this specific bid, though, a couple of questions. A, given the number of people we had through the hotel and the problem we know in Derby, which has increased over recent years, do we think 2021 units is enough? And you know, should we or could we be bidding for more? Is probably my first question. And my second question, I'll pose that now as well. Just on the back of what Roy said around fixed term tenancies, it's obviously something we've been asked to do in Derby a number of times, and we've stayed away from it because I don't think it's right to be offering Derby Homes tenants fixed term tenancies. You know, secure tenancies definitely the way forward. I understand why it's been done in this circumstance, and it might even help in this circumstance. At least people know they've got reassurance for 2-3 years, and I think it can be extended by 1 year. But when they move off that, hopefully, from these homes, because their circumstances may change, they may be in families, they may be in relationships and all that sort of stuff, what reassurance are we giving them that they will move from these to secure tenancies?
So the first question is 20 enough? No, I don't think it is. but I think we also need to be realistic about what we can achieve within this financial year, and I think 20 is achievable. I'm sure it will also be a challenge for us to go and acquire 20 properties. So any more than 20, I think we would be placing undue pressure on ourselves. But it's worth noting that the 161 million that's available for the capital with support attached to it, that is part of a bigger pot of money, 433 million in total. So the remainder, the 272 million, if my fingers are right as I've counted up, that sum of money will be published in a prospectus to bid for more money come post-April of next year. Hopefully we'll have a better lead-in time and an ability to take this through cabinet and through the proper channels. The ambition of government is to, from this 433 million, is to create 3,300 new tenancies for homeless people. So there's an opportunity moving forward, and we most definitely will be looking to submit a bid for the next round as part of the 272 million. The second part, fixed term tenancies. The fixed term tenancies are, that part of it is something that MHCLG want, and I think that is about ensuring that we're utilising these properties for as many people as we possibly can to provide an accommodation option and solution for them. We're most certainly not going to make any of those 20 that we accommodate in there homeless by, once the non-secure tenancy comes to an end. We absolutely need to make sure that we've got an accommodation option, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to end and eradicate homelessness in Derby, like all local authorities up and down the country. You're on silent, Buggy.
Okay, thanks. Somebody keeps putting me on silent. I reckon it's Lindsay.
No.
So for me, again, on this secure tenancies, just let's be absolutely clear. I think it's our intention that we should take every possible step to get people through this non-secure tenancy into the general housing situation, whereby they can gain a secure property, and that twofold. It secures it for them, but also frees up the option for us for this type of premise to be able to try to move people in with support. So I am as content as I can be with that. Let's be perfectly clear, it's not a change of housing policy for the city. It's specific to these particular properties.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? See, Councillor Pegg was with us. Has he left us? I was glad to see him sharing an interest, but we've obviously satisfied his curiosity.
Yeah. Chair, if I can come in with just seek a little bit more clarity about the wraparound support that individuals will have, because that's going to be the key to making this a success for everybody concerned. What other agencies may be involved in that?
So I don't envisage that Derby Homes would look to provide that support. It's a possibility, but I don't envisage that we would look to be the provider of the support. I think we would look to commission a support provider to deliver the intensive support paid for by £35,000, £140,000 per year. And then around that, we have the street outreach team, the REST team, that will also do that in-reach because they have the relationships with those individuals. And I think ultimately that the relationships are an integral part for anybody that enters into
Can I just ask, Matt, in terms of, have you any idea at the moment the sort of support that's needed? Are we talking to other areas, whether that, you mentioned Finland, you mentioned London, Liverpool and Manchester. Are we talking about social work support? Are we talking type support? Are we talking about local area? Sorry, the people that we have in the various wards at the moment, local area coordinator type support. Are we talking about people with dual diagnosis, people with mental health problems, or they've got habit problems, whether that's drink or drugs? Are you talking about alcohol support? I mean, these are all the things that hopefully are being considered. And hopefully now, as alongside this bid going in, we need to identify the type of support that we might need and where we'll get it from.
Yeah, I mean, all of those. So within the multi-agency Rough Sleeper Hub, that our virtual hub, there are 2 dedicated drug and alcohol treatment workers that are part of that. There's a community psychiatric nurse that is part of that. We have a probation service officer seconded working within housing services, and I understand that probation are looking at funding another part-time post to support and complement that. The police, probation, mental health. We've also got and I think this is quite, I won't forget DWP as well, Roy, but we also have a paramedic that works with the outreach team and Rough Sleepers based out of Safe Space, and the work that the paramedic has done has been absolutely invaluable, and it's I've certainly seen, I've worked in Derby for 15 years or so now, and I've definitely seen an increase in physical deterioration in the physical health of the rough sleeping population. And so the work of the paramedic and primary care and the health system, that is absolutely included and absolutely necessary. Okay.
Can I start in terms of, obviously it's a bit like a ladder, isn't it? Taking people at various rungs of that ladder. Yeah. I mean, what sort of links will we have in terms of training, education, and employment?
So the Building Better Opportunities program and the Opportunities for Change, we're quite linked in with that. As we also look at a redesign of the Padley Day Centre, I think we're moving away from a day centre to a training centre that empowers individuals, and part of that is preparing people for independent living. And an example would be not cooking a meal for them, but helping them to cook their own meal, but also doing that training and support, getting them job ready, and that all links in with DWP. So through the Homeless Liaison Forum, we have representation at every meeting, apart from exceptional circumstances, if someone's on leave or whatever. But DWP they walk right alongside us with homelessness and are an invaluable partner.
Thanks, Matt. Phil, I don't know if you wanted to add anything around the wraparound services for the city.
Not in particular. I think Matt did a great job of trying to capture everything there. I mean, they'll be supporting with these tenancies. That will be, the one-to-one contact with the individuals, but also part of that will be to help coordinate all that additional support from like the BBO service that Matt mentioned, and health, and all the other things that are complexities of the needs of the people that we're trying to work with and help them to maintain independence. It's not straightforward. It's extremely complicated. There's a lot to bring in, and that's the expertise of the support that we will fund and bring in with the revenue element, and also that we bring in from our REST team, from our Russell Sleeper Outreach team, and that will provide that support as well for those individuals. So yeah, I think that's it covered.
Brilliant, thank you, Phil. So we've got 5 recommendations, 4 of which we've covered off in some detail. The last one, 2.5, is the delegation to acquire the properties, and I absolutely understand, and we've referred to the fact that it could be quite challenging to acquire these 20 properties within the allotted time. So we need to be able to make decisions on the properties. Roy, can I ask, I guess you've already probably made it known that you want a progress report on how these acquisitions are going, and how we look to achieve the target at the end of the period. And actually, once we've got 20, if we can get an indication of their locations, their suitability, and all the rest of it, it can either be brought back through scrutiny or cabinet, or through yourself to me. Which way around are you planning it?
So I get a regular update on our accommodation strategy in my monthly briefs, and as you know, I've had cabinet member meetings about purchasing properties. I will keep this under review at least on a monthly basis, and I will try and ensure, I know Matt's made the point that it's going to be a challenge purchasing 20 properties by the end of the financial year, but I will try and ensure and keep everybody updated on the number of properties that we have purchased, are in the pipeline, and indeed try and make sure that we meet that target of 20 individual units for this cohort of people. It's a challenge, they're a challenge, but I'm sure with what the team's done already, that they will endeavour to meet that challenge.
So if progress checks reveal any potential issues, you'll bring it back as soon as, yeah?
If there are any issues, Leader, you will be the first to know.
Thank you, I do appreciate that. Okay, so unless there's any questions, I'm going to agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.5. Wish you well in your efforts to get this done, and I'm sure once it is done and you achieve it, it'll help us to maintain that exemplar status across the country, and actually help our homeless people of the city. So thank you for the good work so far. Keep it up, and good luck with what you're doing.
Thank you for all your support and your kind words, everybody. It's greatly appreciated, and I'll pass it on.
Thank you for everybody's attendance. I think that completes the business of this urgent leaders meeting. We'll speak soon.
Thank you.